There is this really incredible scene from the 1991 comedy City Slickers.
Oh, yeah, such a classic movie.
Right. So Billy Crystal plays Mitch, this quintessential, just entirely stressed out city guy. And he's riding alongside Curly, who is this gritty, leathery old cowboy played by Jack Palance.
I love that dynamic. The city guy and the cowboy.
It's perfect. So out of nowhere, Curly reins in his horse, turns to Mitch, and asks, "Do you know what the secret of life is?"
And Mitch is just completely lost.
Totally lost. He says, "No." What? And Curly just holds up one single finger. He says, "This. One thing. Just one thing. You stick to that, and everything else don't mean shh."
Which is such a great line.
Yeah. And Mitch naturally asks, "But what's the one thing?" And Curly just smiles and says, "That's what you've got to figure out."
It's a brilliant piece of screenwriting, honestly, because it just cuts through decades of complicated productivity advice.
Yes, all the noise.
Exactly. That fictional, dusty cowboy actually handed us the absolute truth about achievement. Because to understand why, we don't need, self-help platitudes. We need to look at literal physics.
Which is wild to think about. Physics.
Right, because we naturally assume that to be more successful, we have to do more. Like more hours, more tasks, more simultaneous output.
Hustle culture, basically.
Exactly. But the reality of generating massive momentum requires doing significantly less.
Which is exactly why we are tailoring this deep dive today, specifically for you, the listener.
Yeah.
Because to cut through the paralyzing noise of modern information overload, we have to systematically tear down the assumptions we hold about how work actually gets done.
We really do.
And looking at the physics behind Gary Keller's framework of finding your one thing, I think the best place to start is with the physical reality of the domino effect.
Oh, absolutely. The domino effect is fascinating. Take the 2009 Domino Day record in the Netherlands as a baseline.
Okay.
They set up over 4.49 million dominoes in this massive, intricate warehouse formation.
Just millions of them.
Millions. And with one single flick of the first tiny domino, they unleashed a chain reaction that ultimately produced 94,000 joules of energy.
Wait, 94,000 joules? What does that even look like in real terms?
Well, to put that into a biological perspective, that is the equivalent amount of energy it takes for an average-sized male to do 545 push-ups.
From one flick.
From one tiny flick of a human finger.
That is insane. The sheer volume is impressive, but the mechanism behind it is what really alters the way we should view our own goals, I think.
Oh, for sure.
Because in 1983, a physicist named Loren Whitehead published this discovery in the American Journal of Physics.
Right. Whitehead's research.
Yeah, and he proved that a single domino doesn't just have the power to knock over another domino of its exact same size.
Because of the energy transfer, right?
Exactly. Because of the way potential energy builds and releases as kinetic energy, a falling domino can actually topple an object that is 50% larger than itself.
And Stanford researchers, physicists at the Exploratorium in San Francisco, actually built a physical model in 2001 to test Whitehead's math.
Oh, I didn't know they actually built it.
Yeah, they did. They started with a tiny 2-inch plywood domino. The second was 3 inches, third was 4.5, and so on.
So it's growing by 50% each time.
Exactly. By the time they got to the 8th domino, it was almost 3 feet tall and incredibly heavy.
Wow.
The reaction started with a tiny, barely audible tick of that 2-inch piece of wood, and it ended a few seconds later with a massive, thunderous slam that physically shook the room.
That's amazing. And if you track the math on that geometric progression, it just becomes staggering.
It really does.
Like the 10th domino is about the height of an NFL quarterback. By the 18th, you are looking at something the size of the Leaning Tower of Pisa.
Which is huge.
Right. The 23rd domino tower is over the Eiffel Tower. The 31st looms almost 3,000 feet above the peak of Mount Everest.
And if you keep going...
Yeah, if you could somehow engineer and build the 57th domino, it would literally bridge the distance from the Earth to the moon.
Which is just, it's hard to even wrap your mind around. But the underlying physics here prove that extraordinary success is sequential, not simultaneous.
Sequential. Okay, break that down for me.
Means you apply force to the right thing. And the potential energy from that action makes doing the next right thing significantly easier.
Ah, I see.
What starts out as a linear input becomes geometric output over time.
But if the math behind geometric momentum is that clear, then it really begs the question of why our default human behavior is to stay stuck on a linear path.
Yeah, we fight against it.
We do. We tend to treat success like a standard staircase, like step 1, step 2, step 3, all exactly the same height, requiring the exact same amount of energy.
And we stay linear because we operate under this massive delusion that everything matters equally.
Oh, the first big lie.
Exactly. When our days feel incredibly urgent, we lose the ability to differentiate between what is merely active and what is actually productive.
That's a huge distinction, active versus productive.
It is. And to break that delusion, we have to look back to the late 1930s. There was a quality control manager at General Motors named Joseph M. Joram.
Okay.
He cracked a seemingly unbreakable cipher created by a faulty early computer. And that specific success led him to dive into the research of a 19th century Italian economist named Vilfredo Pareto.
Oh, right, Pareto.
He had created that macroeconomic model showing that 80% of the land in Italy was owned by just 20% of the people.
Yep, the famous 80-20 rule.
Right. It was initially a study of wealth distribution, but Duran realized this wasn't just about Italian real estate. He saw it as a universal law of unequal distribution.
Duran called it the vital few and the trivial many, which he later coined the 80-20 principle.
The vital few and the trivial many. I like that.
Yeah, and he applied it to corporate quality control. He realized that 80% of software bugs were actually caused by just 20% of the coding flaws.
In our own lives, it means a small minority of our effort, about 20%, inevitably leads to the vast majority of our meaningful results.
Which completely invalidates the way most of us structure our mornings.
Oh, completely.
Because the standard to-do list is essentially a survival document.
It really is.
You just write down whatever pops into your head first or whatever email just landed in your inbox. It assigns equal weight to picking up dry cleaning and, writing a strategic business proposal.
Right, which is absurd when you say it out loud.
Yeah.
Successful people, on the other hand, operate off a prioritized success list.
A success list. So how do we build that?
Well, Keller pushes Pareto's principle even further with a concept called extreme Pareto.
Extreme Pareto.
Yeah. The goal isn't just to identify the top 20% of your tasks and stop there. You have to take 20% of that 20%, continually whittling it down until you hit a singularity.
So you just keep filtering.
Exactly. You keep asking yourself what the most vital action is until you are left with the absolute one thing.
And his own firm is a perfect case study for this, right?
Oh, absolutely.
They needed to elevate their standing in a highly competitive industry, so they brought the leadership team together and brainstormed 100 different strategic ideas.
Right.
They applied Pareto to narrow it down to the top 20, and then applied extreme Pareto until they chose just one single idea out of the original 100, which was writing a book on how to become an elite performer.
And executing that one specific project transformed their entire company.
It really did. Or look at a more personal scale from the source. Keller wanted to learn to play classic rock guitar, but only had 20 minutes a day to practice.
Yeah, I love this example.
He asked a guitar legend what his single focus should be. And the answer wasn't to learn full songs. It was to practice the minor blues scale.
Just that one scale.
Just that one. Mastering that one single scale unlocked the mechanical ability to play solos from Eric Clapton to Billy Gibbons.
It sounds incredibly simple in retrospect,
Yeah.
but applying extreme Pareto requires ignoring the psychological safety blanket of being busy.
And I think that is exactly where the friction lies for you and me as listeners.
For sure.
Because a completely clear desk, a zeroed-out email inbox, and a to-do list with 50 checked boxes just feels fantastic. It gives us a dopamine hit that masquerades as a highly productive day.
It's a comforting illusion, but it is an illusion. Checking off trivial tasks is a trap because the squeaky wheel does not always deserve the grease.
That's a great way to put it.
If you spend your whole day meticulously checking off the bottom 80% of your list, you haven't actually moved the needle on your goals. You've just played a game of checkoff that nobody actually wins.
So if we successfully apply extreme Pareto and identify our lead domino, the immediate biological hurdle is that our brains refuse to look at just one thing at a time.
We really hate doing just one thing.
We do. We trick ourselves into thinking we can tackle that massive geometric domino while simultaneously answering emails and, listening to a conference call. We assume we can multitask.
Which brings us to lie number 2. Stanford researchers actually tested multitasking in 2009, and the results completely flipped our cultural assumptions on their head.
What did they find?
So, Clifford Nass, a psychology professor, conducted a massive study on heavy multitaskers. He went into the research assuming these individuals must have evolved some secret cognitive ability to filter information and manage working memory.
Because they do it so much, they must be good at it.
That was the assumption. But what he found was the exact opposite. He concluded that high multitaskers are suckers for irrelevancy.
Ouch.
Yeah. They couldn't ignore distractions, their memory was disorganized, and they were, to use his precise words, lousy at everything.
Lousy at everything. That is so brutal. And the etymology of the word multitasking makes this even more ironic.
Oh, definitely.
Because it wasn't invented to describe human behavior. The term originated in the 1960s to describe 10 megahertz computers.
Right, it was for machines.
Exactly. It was a technical descriptor for a CPU alternating between tasks. But we somehow co-opted the word and decided the modern human cortex should be able to process multiple complex inputs simultaneously.
But the human brain simply does not process simultaneously. When we attempt to multitask, the brain engages in what cognitive scientists call task switching.
Task switching, so we're just bouncing back and forth.
Exactly. You are rapidly shifting your attention back and forth between different subjects. And there is a massive cognitive penalty for this.
How bad is the penalty?
Every time you switch, your brain has to reassimilate the context of the new task. Depending on the complexity of what you are doing, the cost of switching can add anywhere from 25% to over 100% more time to complete those tasks than if you had done them sequentially.
That is wild. Think about a juggler. We perceive them as holding 3 or 4 balls in the air at the exact same time. It looks like simultaneous management.
Right, it looks seamless.
But if you slow down the footage, they are rapidly catching and throwing one ball at a time. It is a complete optical illusion of simultaneity, just like our workday.
And the underlying mechanism of why this happens comes down to brain channel.
Okay, brain channels.
Yeah, so you can easily walk and talk at the same time because motor functions and vocal processing use entirely different channels in the brain. There is no conflict.
Makes sense.
But imagine you are driving a car and your spouse is in the passenger seat describing how they want to rearrange the living room furniture.
Okay, I've definitely been in that situation.
Right. To picture that new layout, you have to engage your visual cortex. But because driving also heavily requires your visual cortex to monitor the road, channel interference occurs.
Oh, wow.
The bandwidth is exceeded, and you literally become functionally blind to the car braking right in front of you.
Because the sensory conflict literally shuts down your processing.
Exactly.
And in the context of distracted driving or a pilot or a surgeon, that cognitive drop-off is fatal. We would never tolerate a cardiovascular surgeon checking their email while operating.
Of course not.
Yet we readily accept that same cognitive handicap when doing our own most important professional work.
We accept it because we misunderstand what it takes to stay focused. We assume that avoiding task switching and focusing sequentially requires this, endless, superhuman well of discipline and willpower.
Which brings us to the mechanics of how we actually execute this. If
Yeah.
we know the physics of the domino, and we know we can't task switch, how do we force ourselves to sit down and do the work day after day?
It's the big question.
Because the narratives is that highly successful people live in a grueling, full-time state of disciplined self-denial.
But that narrative fundamentally misunderstands human endurance. Discipline is not a marathon, it is a sprint.
A sprint.
Yes,
Hmm.
you only need enough discipline to build a habit, and then the habit takes over. Consider Michael Phelps. As a child, he was diagnosed with ADHD. His kindergarten teacher explicitly told his mother he would never be able to focus on anything. He was wildly undisciplined in many areas of his early life,
Right.
yet he became the most decorated Olympian in history. He didn't achieve that by magically becoming a universally disciplined human being. He achieved it by building a fortress around one single daily habit: window swimming every single day, 365 days a year.
So he applied selected discipline to a highly specific window of time.
Exactly.
And the timeline for building those windows is fascinating. The cultural myth is that it takes 21 days to form a habit.
We hear that all the time.
But a 2009 study at University College of London actually tracked the neurological pathway of habit formation. They found it takes an average of 66 days to form a new habit.
66 days is the average threshold for an action to become automatic. And the brilliant part of human biology is what happens after that threshold is crossed. Once a habit locks in, it requires significantly less cognitive effort and discipline to maintain. The researchers also noted a phenomenon called the halo effect.
The halo effect, what's that?
When the subject successfully acquired one positive habit, like exercising or focused deep work, they spontaneously experienced improvements in other areas.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they reported less stress, better diets, and less impulsive spending. Doing the right thing regularly in one specific area liberates your brain from having to constantly monitor your behavior across the board.
Wow. But getting through those initial 66 days, however, requires willpower.
It does.
And just like discipline, we completely misunderstand how willpower functions. We treat it like it's always on will call, just waiting for us to summon it on command.
Which couldn't be further from the truth.
Right. Neurologically, willpower is a renewable but severely limited resource. It operates exactly like the battery indicator on a smartphone.
Yeah, it's a perfect analogy.
You wake up with a full green charge, and every single decision you make, from what to wear, to navigating traffic, to answering emails, drains that battery.
And the data shows that the stakes of how we manage that battery are incredibly high. Walter Mischel's famous Stanford marshmallow test from the late 1960s is the classic example.
Oh, I've heard of this one.
Yeah, researchers offered young children one treat immediately, or two treats if they could wait 15 minutes alone in a room.
So hard for a kid.
Almost impossible. But years later, they tracked those same individuals down. The ones who possessed the willpower to delay gratification had SAT scores that were, on average, 210 points higher than those who couldn't wait.
210 points higher.
Yes, willpower is a massive indicator of long-term academic and financial success.
But the battery drains so rapidly. Baba Shiv, another Stanford professor, demonstrated how fragile the system is.
Right, the cognitive load study.
Yeah. He took two groups of students. One group was asked to memorize a simple 2-digit number. The other group had to memorize a complex 7-digit number.
Which takes just a little bit more mental energy.
Exactly. Both groups then walked down a hall and were offered a choice of snack: a rich chocolate cake or a healthy fruit salad.
And let me guess.
Yep. The students carrying the tiny extra cognitive load of a 7-digit number were nearly twice as likely to choose the chocolate cake.
The biology behind that choice is fascinating. Because the prefrontal cortex, the specific part of the brain responsible for deep focus, long-term planning, and impulse control, runs heavily on glucose.
It needs fuel.
Exactly. The human brain only accounts for about 2% of our body weight, but it consumes a massive 1/5 of our daily calories.
Wow.
When you use your mind for complex decision-making, your blood sugar drops, and that prefrontal cortex literally loses electrical power.
And evolutionary biology dictates that when the brain loses power, it fiercely protects its remaining energy reserve.
It has to survive.
Right, so it reverts to its lowest effort default settings. There is a chilling study of the Israeli parole board that illustrates this perfectly.
Oh, this study is so eye-opening.
It really is. Judges were hearing parole cases back to back all day. The data showed that right after breakfast or a mid-morning snack break, the chances of a prisoner getting a favorable ruling, which requires complex thought and risk assessment from the judge, peaked at 65%.
Okay.
But as the morning dragged on and the judges suffered severe decision fatigue, that favorable rate plunged to near zero right before lunch.
Because when willpower runs out, the brain takes the path of least resistance. For a judge facing a complex parole decision on an empty stomach, the default low-energy choice is simply to say no and keep the prisoner locked up.
Yeah, the status quo requires zero analytical processing.
Exactly.
If we apply that to our own lives, the implications are huge. When you or I reach for the junk food at 8 p.m., or when we endlessly scroll social media instead of working on a passion project, it is not a deep moral failing.
But it's not a character flaw.
No, it is not an inherent lack of character. It is literal biological exhaustion. Our cognitive battery is drained, and the brain defaults to its lowest energy setting.
Precisely. And the practical application here is critical, because willpower is a physical, limited resource driven by glucose and rest. You must give it the time of day it deserves.
Time block it.
Exactly. You have to execute your most important work, your one thing, your lead domino early in the morning, or whenever your battery is at its absolute peak.
So no saving the hard stuff for the end of the day.
No. You cannot wait until 5 p.m. and expect your prefrontal cortex to have the fuel required to tackle your most complex geometric goals.
Following this logic leads us to a highly effective but somewhat intimidating conclusion.
How so?
Well, you isolate your lead domino using extreme Pareto. You fiercely protect your visual and cognitive channels from task switching. You pour your peak morning willpower into a 66-day sprint to forge an unbreakable habit.
Right.
If you actually manage to do all of that, won't your life become drastically, intensely unbalanced?
Yes, it absolutely will.
Yeah, wow.
and acknowledging that reality forces us to confront the final and perhaps most pervasive misunderstanding we have about success. We view a balanced life as the ultimate metric of well-being, but striving for absolute equilibrium is a destructive trap.
That's a strong statement, but it's revealing to look at the historical timeline. The specific term work-life balance didn't even enter the cultural lexicon until the mid-1980s, coinciding with the massive rise of dual-career families.
Really? Just the 80s?
Yeah. We discuss it as if it were this ancient sacred state of philosophical being, but it is a completely modern corporate invention.
And it is an unattainable metric. If you define balance as the middle ground, where everything receives an equal share of your time and energy, you have to realize that significant breakthroughs never happen in the middle.
Where do they happen?
Magic and extraordinary results only happen at the extremes. If you try to give strictly equal time to every aspect of your life, you spread your potential energy so thin that everything gets shortchanged.
If true balance is mathematically and practically impossible, it sounds like we are forced to choose what we are going to intentionally neglect.
We are, but the framework for doing so is what matters. The solution isn't balance, it is counterbalancing.
Counterbalancing.
Right. And the rules for counterbalancing look very different depending on whether you are analyzing your professional life or your personal life. At work, you must go long.
What does going long mean?
This means you intentionally stay out of balance for extended periods of time, sometimes weeks or months, to focus obsessively on your lead domino. You have to emotionally accept that other trivial work issues, the bottom 80% will be left underserved.
But in your personal life, the cadence has to change. You must go short.
Exactly.
You have to frequently counterbalance between your physical health, your family, your close friends, and your personal integrity. You can't neglect any of those core human elements for very long without causing permanent damage.
You really can't.
James Patterson, the author, uses a brilliant analogy for this tension. He suggests imagining life as a game where you are constantly juggling 5 balls: work, family, health, friends, and integrity.
Okay, I like that visual.
Work is a rubber ball. If you drop it or leave it alone for a while, it will eventually bounce back. But family, health, friends, and integrity, those are glass balls.
Oh, wow.
If you drop one of those, it doesn't bounce. It will be irrevocably scuffed, nicked, or completely shattered.
That is a powerful analogy.
And there is a story from the text that grounds that analogy in a heartbreaking reality.
What's the story?
So, a woman's mother was a school teacher and her father was a farmer. They were incredibly frugal, scrimping and saving their entire lives for a grand retirement.
Waiting for someday.
Right. The mother would buy these beautiful pieces of fabric, carefully storing them away in a closet to make custom travel clothes for when they finally retired and had the time to explore the world. Yeah. But she never got to use them. She developed terminal cancer during her final year of teaching. After the father eventually passed away years later, they found that same closet, still full of unused fabric.
Wow, that's incredibly sad.
It is a devastating reminder that you cannot cut a deal with time. You can't pause the clock on a 5-year-old's birthday or a spouse's health while you spend 5 years going long at the office.
It perfectly illustrates the danger of operating at the extremes without conscious awareness. We have to fundamentally change our vocabulary.
How so?
We need to strip the word balancing from our goals and replace it with prioritizing. Achieving extraordinary results demands that you go out of balance.
Right.
The real skill is in how meticulously you manage the time spent on those extremes, constantly shifting your attention between the rubber ball of your professional ambition and the fragile glass balls of your personal life.
Let's track the progression of what we've unpacked today.
Okay, let's recap.
We started by looking at the pure geometric physics of the domino effect, how small sequential force builds exponential momentum.
Right.
To find that first domino, we had to dismantle the way we view our daily tasks, using extreme Pareto to filter out the trivial majority.
Whittling it down to the one thing.
Exactly. Then we confronted the biological reality that our brain channels cannot process multiple complex inputs, exposing task switching as an illusion.
Multitasking is a lie.
We mapped the literal glucose depletion in our prefrontal cortex to understand why our willpower is finite and why we must apply it during peak morning hours to build 66-day habits.
The 66-day sprint.
And finally, we abandoned the mid-1980s corporate myth of work-life balance in favor of radical, intentional counterbalancing.
We have spent this entire deep dive analyzing this from the perspective of individual physics and biology. But I want you to consider the macro implications of everything we just discussed.
What do you mean?
Think about what happens when an entire Fortune 500 company or an entire society operates under the collective illusion of multitasking and equal priorities.
Oh, wow.
If our individual willpower is a finite battery, severely depleted by task switching, we are currently facing a geometric deficit in collective cognitive energy.
That's terrifying.
If that is true, how does that fundamentally alter the way we should be building our corporate teams, designing our educational systems, or engineering our daily technology moving forward?
That is a staggering concept to consider, that the very tools we built to make us faster are actively draining the exact biological resource we need to achieve anything meaningful.
It really makes you think.
It does. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope unpacking the mechanics behind these ideas helps you ruthlessly prioritize your own time.
Find your lead domino.
Exactly. Remember, the physics are clear. You have to focus small if you want the momentum to live big. Tomorrow morning, before your cognitive battery drains, find your domino.